Hey guys, we're back with the notes for 12.1. Today we're going to be working on multiplication fluency and GCFs. This is a topic you've already done before. We're just clarifying and kind of refining it a little bit more as we move back into a review topic of factoring. Okay, so the first thing is, if you would, go ahead and write down the definitions, pause it if you need to, and then we'll get started. Wonderful. So our factor pairs are going to be any two numbers that multiply together to make the given number. So the first thing I want to talk about is making sure we understand the signs. If you have a positive number, that means you have to have the same signs. They're either both positive or both negative. If your number is a negative, then we need the first to be positive with a negative, or the first to be negative with a positive. They need to be opposites, okay? So before we get started, I want to put all these numbers as just kind of a reminder of what you need in order to get started. So I'm going to write these out. If they're positive, we want them the same. If they're negative, we want to switch them. If they're negative, we want to switch them. If they're positive, we want them the same. So I'm just going through and filling all of those symbols out before we get started, so there's no hesitation. Okay? All right, then we're going to go ahead and put on our numbers. It's very, very important that you always start with a 1. We're not ever going to start with something different. We're not going to go off the factors, just ones that you can recall quickly. We want to list out every option from least to greatest, okay? So on problem 1, I'm listing them out same signs. So 1 times 15. I'm going to keep the same pair of numbers, but this time I'm going to change the signs. So now they are going to be both negative. Scoot that over just a little bit. There we go. All right, I'm going to check 2. Does 2 go into 15? No. Does 3 go into 15? Yes. 3 times 5, both positive. Same numbers next time, but now I'm going to change them both to negatives. I'm going to check, does 4 go into 15? No. Then that means my pair is done. I've checked every number all the way back to this guy. Let's try the next problem. Number 2. Always start with the same number. 1 times a negative 20. So right now we have a positive with a negative. We're going to switch the signs. Same numbers, just switch the signs. Next one would be, does 2 go into 20? Yes. 2 times a negative 10. Keep the same numbers, just switch the signs. Negative 2 and 10. Does 3 go into 20? No. Does 4 go into 20? Yes. 4 times a negative 5. We're going to keep the same numbers, but switch the signs. Negative 4, positive 5. 5 is already on the board, so I'm done checking. We have our whole factor pair. We're going to try number 3. Number 3, the sign is positive, so we need the same on both sides, both positive or both negative. 1 times 24. Same numbers, change the signs. 2 times 12, both positive. Next one is going to be same numbers, change the signs. Does 3 go into 24? Yes. 3 times 8. Same numbers, but change the signs. I'm going to shrink this up just a little bit because we're going to need one more pair. Last set, does 4 go into 24? Yes. 4 times 6. Same numbers, change the signs. Please make sure you are checking, does 5 go into 24? 6 is already on it, but we should be checking 5 just to make sure as the numbers get bigger. Okay? All right, last one, number 4. Will you pause the video, try this one on your own, and then check with me? Like for real, please pause it and try this problem and then check it. Okay, let's try it. When you start, here's what I want to make sure we're not doing. If yours looks like this, can you please fix it? I don't want the numbers moving. I want the sign moving, the plus or minus. So your next one should be negative 1 and 30. Again, make sure you're not going weird orders like 10 and 3. It should go in order. You should start with your next number 2, negative 15, negative 2, positive 15, and keep rolling all the 2s and then write your 3s. Negative 10, negative 3, positive 10. Again, still listing out in orders. 4 does not work, but your last pair should be 5 with a negative 6, negative 5 with a positive 6. Okay? When you have all that written down, take a second, make sure they match, and I'll meet you on the next page. All right, if you would please, go ahead and copy what you see, pause it if you need to, and then we'll get started. Great. So now that we're talking about GCFs, we still need to know factor pairs, right? Except this time, we're not going to do negatives. There's never going to be a negative that is the greatest thing they have in common, because negatives are small numbers, okay? So what we're going to do instead is only list out the positive numbers, okay? All right, so when I start listing this out, I'm going to go 1 and 15, 3 and 5. That's my only pairs. Let's try 24. 1 and 24, 2, 12, 3, 8, 4, 6, and 5 doesn't work. So if I'm looking for what the biggest number they have in common is, they have a 3. They both have a 3 in common, so 3 is my GCF. Let's try another one. Number 2 has negatives on it. That's great, but we're not going to list out negatives. So even though that negative 20 is on there, I'm only going to do 1 and 20. 2 and 10, 4 and 5. I'm going to skip over all the negatives, okay? Let's try the 35. 1 and 35. 2 doesn't work, 3 doesn't work, 4 doesn't work, and 5 is the next number that works. 5 and 7. So the biggest number they have in common, only on the positives, is going to be our 5, okay? All right, I think you probably got the hang of that by now. Let's move into some variables, okay? So I'm going to scroll up. Let's try number 5. So on 5, I'm listing out my factors, 1 and 48, 2 times 24, 3 times 16. If you don't know these off the top of your head, type it in, 48 divided by 3, and see if you get a number. We got 16, so that's my other pair. Then I could do 48 divided by 4. It's going to give me 12, so that's my next pair. 4 and 12. You can keep going with that until it doesn't work. So does 5 go in? No, it's not going to give you an answer. Let's try 6. Does 6 go in? Yes. It's going to give you 8. Does 7 go in? No. All right, so once we get done with the numbers for the t-charts, the difference on here is that now I have x to the third. So what I want you to do is list out 3 x's, x to the third. All right, we're going to move into the 36. 1 and 36. 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, 5 doesn't work, but 6 does, 6 times 6. I have an x to the fourth up top, so we're going to list out 1, 2, 3, 4 x's. All right, so let's find what they have in common. I'm looking at the GCF. I see they have 6's in common, but they have a bigger number. The bigger number is 12. So 12 is my GCF. They both have a 12. I only write it once because it's what they have in common. So when I do the x's, it's going to be the same thing. They both have one x, so I write down an x, but I want to see if they have more. They both have a second, they both have a third, but they don't have 4 in common. They only have 3. Notice that I'm using 3 and not 6. I'm not counting up how many total. I'm saying they both have 3. Okay? All right, let's jump down to the bottom. I'm going to try and do 2 more. Let's try 8 and 9. Okay, so problem 8, we're going to go 1 and 3 with 4 x's. Those are my only factors. Number 8, we're going to go 1 and 2 with 3 x's. Those are my only factors. Number 8, we're going to go 1 and 5 because 2 doesn't work, 3 doesn't work, 4 doesn't work. And there's no x's on that problem. So this one's a little bit different. The only thing they have in common is a 1. And this guy has no x's. So there's no x in my GCF. It's just a 1. What that's going to mean for us is that we have a prime GCF. Those numbers do not have a greatest common factor because the only thing they have in common is a 1. Okay? All right, let's try one last problem. Number 9. We got 1 and 5. Again, those are the only factors, but we do have 3 x's. Next one is going to be 1 and 10. Remember, no negatives. 2 and 5. This guy has 2 x's. Last one, 1 and 25. 2, 3, 4, none of those work. So 5 and 5, those are my factors. And they have 1 x on this guy. All right, so biggest number they have in common is the 5. And they all have 1 x. He doesn't have another one, so they only have one in common. My GCF is 5 with only one X. Okay? All right, if you need a minute, let me zoom out. If you need a minute to copy anything you missed, you can pause it. And then we are going to go page 179, numbers 1 to 9. Please make sure that you make a T-chart for every number and that your final answer is in a box. Okay? Good luck. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to come see me.